Well, it's April 25th, so happy perfect date, everyone. Not too hot, not too cold. All you need is a light jacket. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainely Movies. Today I'm going to be talking about the 2000 action comedy, Miss Congeniality. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content, like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. All of my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and even some tailored film recommendations. So be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all of that extra content. Miss Congeniality stars Sandra Bullock, Michael Caine, and Benjamin Bratt, and was directed by Petrie. It tells the story of FBI agent Gracie Hart, who must go undercover as a beauty pageant contestant while investigating a threat made against the Miss United States pageant. As somebody who watches and reviews movies for not only a living, but also for fun, there are hundreds of reasons that I love film. But one of the things I like most about movies is the scope of their appeal. Sure, we've got movies that are positively received and widely considered to be good, just as we've got negatively received movies that are generally considered to be bad. But one of the coolest things to me is that every movie out there that's ever been made is somebody's favorite movie. And also, somebody else's least favorite movie, regardless of general critical or public consensus on the film. We all have those movies that we absolutely love, even though very few agree with our opinion or passion for the film. I know I've got my fair share of these types of movies, most of which being comedies. I think a lot of people would use the term guilty pleasure to describe films like this, but that's not a concept I really ascribe to, because I'm not going to feel guilty about loving a movie. As you could probably guess at this point, Miss Congeniality is one of those movies for me. I first saw it in the theater when I was 10 years old, and I've loved it for 25 years now. Sometimes we get lucky with the movies we love. Not only are they highly regarded, but they're also technically sound movies. They're objectively good films. More often, though, we find ourselves inexplicably attached to or loving a movie with some definite faults, even if it's easy for us to overlook those faults compared to the average person. And I can recognize and admit that Miss Congeniality is certainly a fault-filled film. The general story is very silly, with a ridiculous and unlikely premise, but it works in that 2000s comedy sort of way. If you can suspend your disbelief and buy into the basic premise, it's easy and enjoyable to go along for the ride. This isn't exactly an original story, but there are enough pieces to make it feel like its own thing. That said, it does follow a pretty typical fish-out-of-water comedy storyline, and we have seen other similar-ish undercover stories before, like Kindergarten Cop, for example. So the screenplay here feels a bit familiar, even when it's not riffing on police procedurals or classic comedy tropes. It's got quite a few plot holes and dangling story threads within its silly story. I mean, Cheryl's apparent connection to an activist group is dropped just as quickly as it's introduced. There's a bit of a shoehorned romantic subplot, and the mystery at the heart of the case isn't all that mysterious, though I honestly can't remember exactly when my 10-year-old self had it all figured out the first time I watched it. You could easily pick apart the story and screenplay if you wanted to, but really, it's perfectly fine for a silly, fun 2000s comedy. The story may not be all that much to write home about, but the performances and array of entertaining characters certainly help with that. Sandra Bullock is undoubtedly the star here, and likely the main draw for most people. She's somebody you either love or hate, find funny or always roll your eyes at. I've always liked her, and this is a role that feels tailor-made for her 2000s comedy era. She's entertaining and convincing with all aspects of this character. We're first introduced to this character's true self, the brash and driven agent Gracie Hart of the FBI. Bullock plays up the slovenliness a bit for laughs, but helps to establish that this is a character who prioritizes her job at the expense of everything else. The fish-out-of-water humor comes into play when Gracie is reluctantly coerced into going undercover, as a contestant in a beauty pageant. Here, Bullock takes on the role of New Jersey Miss United States contestant Gracie Lou Freebush. There's an entertaining front-facing aspect to this character, as she attempts to assume a pageant persona for the cameras and other contestants. But it's the back-facing aspect of this character where the true fish-out-of-water comedy shines, as the brash Hart personality comes up against the norms and not-so-norms of pageantry prep. Bullock makes it look easy as she nails both sides of this character with her typical every woman charm and humor. Sandra Bullock is clearly the star here and the one who carries the story and much of the comedic burden, but the movie is absolutely riddled with great supporting characters and performances, which add to the humor and entertainment immensely. My favorite of the supporting cast has to be Michael Caine as the sarcastic and reluctant beauty pageant coach, Victor Melling. Caine has been in more than 150 movies across 8 decades, has had dozens of memorable roles and performances, and has even won 2 Oscars. And yet, I think this is still my favorite role of his. He's just so funny in his reactions, and the evolution of his relationship with Hart is surprisingly sweet. Plus, he's a pro at gliding. Benjamin Bratt offers up a different kind of entertaining performance as Hart's partner and love interest. The relationship aspect is a bit cheesy, but they have decent chemistry, and he's got some funny, often playfully biting line deliveries. Plus, who could forget his reactions in the scene when Hart teaches everybody to sing? William Shatner provides some humor as the slightly oblivious pageant host Stan Fields, and Candice Bergen eats up her role as pageant director Kathy Morningside. And then, of course, we've got Heather Burns as Miss Rhode Island Cheryl Fraser. Slightly ditzy, although we learn that her field of study is nuclear fission and elementary particles, she's too sweet and naive for the world of pageantry. It's an entertaining character and performance, with a great believable friendship with Bullock's Freebush. And of course, she's the reason we all think of April 25th as the perfect date. It can sometimes be hard to remember, especially in the critical sphere, but we can't judge all movies on an equal footing. It might sound like a weird comparison, but think of it like a dog show. I watch the National Dog Show every Thanksgiving, and they always make a point to remind the audience that the dogs aren't being judged against each other, but rather against their breed standard. And so we can't judge a film like Miss Congeniality against Citizen Caine or The Dark Knight. We've got to judge it against its genre standard, or more precisely, the early 2000s comedy standard. These movies had a different intent than dramas or horrors or thrillers. They were just meant to entertain. Some minor themes and messages would manage to occasionally snake through, but light comedies rarely cared about much beyond being fun crowd pleasers. So Miss Congeniality is absolutely silly at times, predicated on a very unlikely scenario. It's not a technically proficient film by any stretch of the imagination, but it entertains. Whether we're talking sight gags like Bullock's pratfalls and the comedic framing of Morningside's head with a photo of a crown on the wall, or dialogue-based humor like jokes or funny one-liners coming from nearly every character at one time or another, it succeeds in its entertaining intent, making for a fun, light, and breezy feel-good movie that you can enjoy at any time. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. Pro number 1 has got to be the characters and the performances. The star of the show here is obviously Sandra Bullock in her entertaining dual role as FBI agent Gracie Hart and Miss New Jersey Gracie Lou Freebush. It's a role that feels tailor-made for her comedic strengths and personality, but she's not the only one who has an opportunity to humorously shine here. Michael Caine delivers my favorite comedic performance of his as the sarcastic beauty pageant coach Victor Melling. Benjamin Bratt, William Shatner, Candice Bergen, and Ernie Hudson all amuse here as well, but special praise needs to go to Heather Burns for her portrayal of Miss Rhode Island Cheryl Fraser. With her light jacket, affinity for Satan's panties, and degree in nuclear fission, she gives one of the funniest performances in the film, all while reminding us that twirling can be a real art. Pro number 2 is the entertainment value. With some movies, it's easy to single out and praise things like the cinematography or writing or themes. Other movies just entertain, and this is one of those films. It'll never be a candidate for the Criterion Collection or any AFI lists, but it's an extremely enjoyable comedy. Funny on multiple levels, fun in its occasional silliness, and packed full of entertaining characters and situations, this is an incredibly breezy, feel-good crowd pleaser. On the con side, my only issues are really just minor nitpicks. Now, I realize these won't be nitpicks for most people. They'll be full-blown cons, and that's fine. Like I've made extremely clear from the start of this video, I love this movie. It's been a comedy favorite of mine since I was 10 years old, and it's one of those movies whose issues I've always been able to easily overlook. chances are good you aren't able to overlook them the way I do. So there's our minor and major issue discrepancy. Anyway, the screenplay is nothing overly special. It's a familiar type of fish-out-of-water story and has got its fair share of plot holes and silly illogicalities that you could easily pick apart if you wanted to do so with a comedy. One of the antagonists of the story is underwhelming and unfunny when compared to the rest of the cast, and from a technical standpoint, there's really nothing special about this film. The score, the plain cinematography, the flat lighting, the cheesy soundtrack, it's all as early 2000s comedy as you can get. And yet, I still love it. Before I give you my rating and recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying Miss Congeniality or any of the other films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. I'm gonna give Miss Congeniality 5 out of 5 paws. No surprise there if you actually watched this review. I recognize that very few people will agree with me on this rating, but that's okay. We all have movies we feel like this about. This film's certainly not without its script and technical issues, but it's light, comedic, feel-good fun. Sandra Bullock shines here, and along with an assortment of enjoyable and funny supporting characters, makes for an entertaining time no matter how often I watch the film. I would recommend Miss Congeniality to anybody looking for a breezy and fun early 2000s comedy. It's got a little bit of action, a tiny bit of mystery, and a whole lot of fish-out-of-water laughs. Sandra Bullock fans won't want to miss her performance here, and Michael Caine has a surprisingly fun comedic turn here too, so it might be worth checking out if you're curious to see that. It's doubtful that many people would give this film 5 paws like me, without the benefit of nostalgia and dozens of rewatches, but I do think it's a comedy worth watching if you haven't seen it. If you liked Miss Congeniality, I would recommend Sister Act. This is another fish-out-of-water comedy with a great cast and a lot of funny moments. Rather than an undercover FBI agent in a beauty pageant, this film stars Whoopi Goldberg as a lounge singer forced to hide in a convent as part of a witness protection program. If you'd like another 2000s fish-out-of-water undercover story with a ridiculous premise, you might want to watch White Chicks. This tells the story of 2 black male FBI agents who go undercover as fairly unconvincing white women in order to protect 2 socialites. It's a film that was critically panned and one that could never be made today, even only 20 years later, but it's undeniably entertaining in spite of its utter stupidity. And if you'd like to step away from the undercover element, not to mention over-the-top comedy, you should check out Educating Rita. In this Pygmalion comedy drama, Julie Waters plays a hairdresser dissatisfied with her life, who signs up for a college literature course, only to have a sarcastic and jaded Michael Caine as her professor. The story's a bit different, but it's clear that Caine drew upon his character here when crafting his performance as Vic in Miss Congeniality. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen Miss Congeniality? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, describe your perfect date. Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe while you're at it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainely Movies, the way life should be.